Well, many pupils returned to school for the first time in a while, but in KwaZulu-Natal there were some challenges. Of course, unrest in that province left several schools vandalized. There's also security concerns around some pupils returning to schools in Phoenix. Let's speak to the KwaZulu-Natal Education MEC, Kwazi Mshengu. MEC, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it. Let's start with the security concerns. Of course, you were in Phoenix earlier today. I saw your speech to pupils. How concerned should parents be about the risk of their children being attacked?
Well, our view is that there is no reason for parents to be concerned to an extent that they can withhold their learners from going to school. It's a message that we have been giving to parents even before today, but we also believe that today was an example that indeed our schools are safe, that learners are safe even when they commute from home to schools and back from schools. What we saw today in our schools was quite encouraging, that in spite of the challenges that we have experienced in the past few days, learners were quite happy to be in schools, and they were quite happy to see one another. We couldn't identify any tension amongst themselves. And the law enforcement agencies, the SAPS as well as the SNDF, were also quite visible on the streets to ensure that they maintain law and order, but also to give that necessary comfort to our learners, to our educators, and to our parents, that indeed our learners are safe when they go to school. So the message that we continue to give is that parents must release their learners comfortably, knowing that they are safe when they go to school.
Yeah, so how do you take those security measures, though, to protect so many pupils when there are threats? What's in place?
Well, as I said, the law enforcement agencies are quite visible. They are maintaining law and order not only in relation to learners going to school, but in the communities in KZN, be it Phoenix, Chatsworth, and other areas that were heavily affected during the mayhem that we have experienced in the past. So that's the first measure that made things easy for us to say the law enforcement are on the ground, quite alert, and they are giving that hope to our people that it is indeed safe. But also, even when we go to our schools, we have engaged with a number of stakeholders, the educators, unions, the SGPs, and other stakeholders, organs of society, in the past few days to say they also have a responsibility to make sure that they protect the kids, they protect our schools. And what we see actually is exactly what we agreed upon, which makes it possible really to run teaching and learning without any disturbance, as the case was in the past few days. So even our schools remain a safe environment to be, but even when we leave schools, our streets are quite safe and stable at the present moment.
MEC, of course, you were contacted by many parents who were concerned about these posts on social media that were going around saying that certain pupils from specific race groups will be targeted as they leave schools. What part can you possibly play in terms of trying to find a solution to these issues and concerns?
There is a process that is led by the Premier and involving all of us as MECs. The legislature is also involved, and other stakeholders in communities to try and facilitate peace process amongst the two communities. This is an additional measure over and above the presence of the security forces on the ground. But we have also said in our schools, we have implored educators and principals in particular that they must allow some kind of an interface between them and these learners and amongst learners themselves, reflecting on what has happened, because we can't hide it, we can't ignore it. Learners were exposed to what they were actually not supposed to be exposed to. Now, the issue is that we need to talk about it, explain why it was wrong for such thing to happen, and why it must never happen, particularly in their generation. But also, as department, we send out our psychologists, working also with the Department of Social Development, to ensure that these learners also are assisted psychologically, because we anticipated that there may be learners who have lost loved ones in the process, and they may come to school with anger. And at the slightest moment of provocation, things may go south. So that is why we, on the first day of schooling, We sent our psychologists in most of the schools in Phoenix as well as in North Bay, just also to help in dealing with the psychological effect of what has happened. And we believe that all these attempts and interventions that we're making makes it possible really for the stability to return in the area. And we believe that parents should not also focus so much on fake news and these threats that are being sent around. People will continue to do so until they are arrested and until the law enforcement deals with them. So they will continue to send these things because it is clear that within the communities, there are those people who want to incite violence. Now, we want to work with parents, we want to work with law enforcement agencies and all other relevant stakeholders to make sure that such criminal elements are isolated. But let's also facilitate the discussion amongst these communities so that they also understand that coexistence is not an option. We need to coexist as a people and prioritize humanity above all else.
So how do you say you are part of a process to facilitate peace in Phoenix when you were out at a school today calling those attacks racist? You blatantly said those were racist attacks and that we have to call it for what it is. How is that helping the process of bringing about peace?
I stand by that articulation, and I did say that it is not an expression of saying all Indian people are racist. I said there is a group of vigilantes from the Indian origin who indiscriminately and mercilessly killed African people. And that those killings were motivated by racism because the people who were killed, who were gunned in the main street of Phoenix, they were not, most of them were not coming from looting. They were just doing things that ordinary people will do. So if you kill African people, and I mean people who are not involved in anything that is against the law, and the only conclusion that we can reach is that those killings were motivated by racism. And calling things by their name doesn't mean that you subscribe to racism or reverse racism, as other people may say, or it means that, or doesn't mean that you are therefore incapable of participating in peace talks. In fact, peace talks can only be genuine only and only if they are anchored on justice for the victims and dealing with things without peppering over the cracks. And that's exactly what we're doing.
I totally get you, but, you know, when it comes to stoking racial tensions and pushing this agenda of one group being racist over the other is another issue when especially you are part of the peace process, this facilitation that you speak of. How are you going into communities as a province to deal with this, outside of you taking a stand, talking to pupils?
You know, what is quite exciting is that a number of fellow compatriots of Indian origins actually agrees with us that these senseless killings were actually motivated by attitude of racism by this small group of vigilantes. And they are actually standing on our side to say, together, let's isolate these criminals, let's call things as they are, and work with all peace-loving people, be it Africans, whites, and Indians or colored, to make sure that we build a South Africa that is truly united and truly non-racial. So the point that I'm making is that calling things by their name does not mean we are frustrating the process of peace. And that is why I'm raising the point that even compatriots of Indian origin, most of them actually agree with this characterization, and they clearly say what happened actually doesn't define them as compatriots of Indian origin, and we agree with that. That is why even when I was addressing learners, I made it clear that these incidents of senseless killings must not define the people of Indian origin. It's not all of them. It's just a few of them who were motivated by racism and decided to embark on these heinous acts.
Yeah, so wouldn't the message be about the community coming out denouncing this and also saying that they are united? Because I've seen so many community members come out to say this should not have happened and that we are united regardless of race. What about that message when you're speaking to learners or to anyone for that instance?
That message, San, is embedded exactly on our core message. That is why I'm saying we must never make a mistake of thinking that what happened in Phoenix, in Chatsworth, in Northern, in Pietermaritzburg, defines the people of Indian origin. It doesn't. And there are many compatriots who are peace-loving, who harbor no attitude of racism. It was this group of vigilantes who took an opportunity of during mayhem to actually put into expression probably what they've been harboring over many years. And that is why we're saying we must stand together and build a truly non-racial and united society, and eliminate anyone, and isolate rather anyone who has attitude of racism, be it an African, Indian or white. Anyone in South Africa who harbors incidents or attitude of racism actually doesn't belong to the future that we want to build. We want to build a South Africa of our dreams, a South Africa that is truly non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, united and prosperous. And we can't be prosperous as a people if we continue to be divided along racial lines. And that is embedded in the message that we are communicating to our people.
All right, absolutely. I agree with you. Thank you so much for that. Let's move on to pupils who are going back to school then. Of course, some schools vandalized. Are all pupils being accommodated in classrooms or not?
Yes, I can confirm, Shahan, that all learners are accommodated, even in schools that were gutted with fire. We're able to deploy mobile classrooms so that those schools could start with effective teaching and learning as of today. And the reports that we got from all of them, including the other 137 that were affected, is that indeed teaching and learning started earnestly today, and all learners were accommodated as per the arrangements that we have made. So we did not, in fact, in all the schools in KwaZulu-Natal, the only school that had some challenges was in Richmond, where it was disrupted by parents demanding that a particular educator should be expelled from that particular school. That is the only incident of disruption that we experienced. But in all the other schools, everything started well and according to plan.
All right. A pleasure talking to you. Appreciate your time. That, of course, is the KwaZulu-Natal Education MEC, Kwazi Mshengu.